brother's wedding, his bride told me I wasn't welcome, so I took back the honeymoon tickets and left. The look on everyone's face when I walked out with that envelope was priceless, but what they didn't know was that those tickets were just the beginning of what I was about to take back. Sarah, my brother David's new wife, stood there in her $5,000 dress with this smug smile as she delivered the news. We've decided this is a family-only celebration now, she announced loud enough for half the reception to hear, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. And since you're not really family, the crystal champagne flute slipped from my hand, shattering against the marble floor of the Beverly Hills Country Club, the sound cutting through the classical music like a knife. The entire reception fell silent. 200 guests turned to stare as Sarah's parents nodded approvingly behind her, and my own parents, just stood there looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. David, my brother who I'd helped through college, who I'd bailed out of trouble more times than I could count, wouldn't even meet my eyes. Sarah savored every second of my humiliation, her perfectly manicured fingers adjusting her pearl necklace as she waited for me to break down and beg. Instead, I reached into my purse, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and smiled. I'm Megan Martinez, 28, and I've been planning weddings for LA's elite for the past 6 years. David is my younger brother by 3 years, and until that moment, I thought we were close. I'd spent the last 8 months planning his dream wedding to Sarah, a woman I never particularly liked but tolerated for his sake. What David didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I hadn't just planned this wedding. I'd paid for most of it, and I was about to remind everyone exactly who held the real power in this beautifully decorated room. The thing about being a wedding planner in Beverly Hills is that you learn to plan for everything, including betrayal. As I stood there holding that envelope, watching Sarah's confident smirk start to falter, I realized this was going to be even more satisfying than I'd imagined, because Sarah had just made the biggest mistake of her perfectly planned life, and she didn't even know it yet. Sarah had started her campaign against me 6 months ago, right after David proposed. It began with little comments about how I was too involved in their relationship, how I needed to find my own life instead of living through David. She convinced him that I was jealous of their happiness, that my suggestions for the wedding were attempts to control them. Slowly but surely, she began cutting me out of decisions I'd been making, claiming she wanted the wedding to reflect their vision, not anyone else's. The irony was almost too perfect. Sarah came from old money. Her father owned a chain of high-end jewelry stores across California, but their finances were tied up in investments and real estate. They looked wealthy, lived wealthy, but had surprisingly little liquid cash. That's why they'd been so grateful when I offered to help with wedding expenses. It's my gift to you both, I'd said, wanting David to have the wedding of his dreams. I'd covered the venue deposit, the catering, the flowers, the band, even those honeymoon tickets to Bora Bora that were burning a hole in my purse. David had been uncomfortable taking money from me at first, but wedding expenses. It's my gift to you both, I'd said, wanting David to have the wedding of his dreams. I'd covered the venue deposit, the catering, the flowers, the band, even those honeymoon tickets to Bora Bora that were burning a hole in my purse. David had been uncomfortable taking money from me at first, but Sarah quickly convinced him it was family helping family. She became positively giddy about spending what she thought was my generous contribution to their happiness. She upgraded everything, the caviar service. At my brother's wedding,